scared of what it meant. If I needed medicine just to feel like me again and keep my demons in every now and then. 'Cause I remember when I thrived, once trying to survive. It's like a trip and took a dive into another life that doesn't feel like mine.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Why Not Be Authentic. I'm Christina, and I am so excited to introduce our next guest. This is David Wimbish.
Yeah.
And he is a part of the band The Collection. And guys, I promise you, after you listen to him speak, you are definitely going to want to listen to his music. As you guys probably already know by now, I went through my really, really bad, dark depression in July, August. And that's when I found David and The Collection on TikTok and his song, The Medication. I even have reels on my TikTok of me coming out of it, crying and then laughing. And basically his song, Medication, saved my life. So if you've not heard it, listen to it on repeat. And without further ado, David.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for allowing us to have you on this podcast.
I'm glad to be here, and I'm very honored that the song has meant a lot to you.
It has. Your song really led me and inspired me. And I would just love to hear more about your journey on how you and the band came together and what was going through your mind as you guys were creating it and producing it and singing it.
Yeah, so my band is wonderful folks, and when we were working on this record, there were 6 of us. Right now there's just 5 of us, but just like wonderful humans. We've all met in kind of different ways, and we're kind of spread across the state of North Carolina, which makes rehearsals a little hard. There's like a 5-hour gap in between all of us, which is a lot. We've always prioritized each other in the band. Like, we've heard a lot of horror stories about bands who are just like, we don't like each other, but we just, we tour together or whatever. And we've just always been like, we're never going to be that. So we've always kind of made mental health a priority on the road because it's a really difficult space. Like, we just played this show in Florida, and somebody who came with us who had never been on the road, like at the end of it was like, I can't believe you do this every night. Like, this is the most exhausted I've ever been. And that was just for one show. And like, yeah, like it's so exhausting. You're not eating well. You're not sleeping very much. And it requires a lot of intention to be able to be kind to each other and give each other proper space. And so it's already kind of been an ethos of our band, I think, just like to be able to survive on the road. Like, how do we create space for each other? We do like cheerleading sessions for each other. We have like a no sarcasm rule in the band, because we're just like, sarcasm is kind of fun for the first 3 days, but then when you're exhausted, it like you quickly start wondering if somebody's actually meaning what they're saying. So like we cut that out, which like a lot of other bands are like, that's crazy, I wouldn't survive without being sarcastic. And we're like, it's actually way healthier for us. So yeah, so we've been touring for quite a few years. We with the same group of people since 2017. And it took us a long time to figure out this new record. I think it took me a long time to figure out this new record because I went through the most difficult mental health space I'd ever been through. And I've struggled with my mental health. I've struggled especially like just chronic deep depression since I was a teenager. And yeah, I just hit a space that was extremely difficult. And I think it made it hard to write music. It made it hard for me to know, to even feel like it was going to be worth putting out an album or what that would look like. A couple years ago, we signed with Network Music Group. It was our first like record label signing, and so it was like, okay, now we have to. Thank you. Yeah. It's like now we have to create an album,
Right.
And I'd been trying to write for a long time. I just didn't know what it was about. I had a lot of songs that were just, cheesy love songs, or it just nothing felt like me, And I think about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, I got sober. And it was the first kind of step for me in my journey of like being forced to like I think I hadn't realized how much I'd used alcohol to cover up or to try to distract from all the things that were deepening my depression spaces.
Right.
And so getting sober, even though it was extremely difficult and extremely emotionally difficult. It helped me to be able to really like head on face, like, this is what I'm struggling with.
Right.
And so, yeah, I was writing, I was finally able to write again, I think because of that space. Like alcohol never made me be able to write music well. Like it always, it always kind of covered it up.
Yeah, it's what a lot of times you would hear people, whether it was depression with alcohol or depression with some type of substance. And to your point, they're really just using that because they want to feel you want to feel normal. You're just trying to numb
Right.
that pain. And that's just,
Right.
people are struggling. And if we don't get the right help and the right resources to help us mentally heal from the trauma, the depression, what we're experiencing mentally, we tend to, as individuals, grasp to that addiction so that we can mask it. But then it also makes us so cloudy. And I think that's a struggle for a lot of people. So the fact that you were able to do that, did you do it cold turkey or did you get any assistance? You did.
I did it cold turkey. I'd try over the course of a few months. I'd try it and it'd be like, oh, I made it 2 weeks, and then I'd be back on it. But then actually what happened is I got COVID and I got it really, really bad. Like I had to go to the hospital, and no, it's okay. I mean, I came through it, but it was really bad, and I had to stop drinking during that. And it was like enough days that I had to stop drinking that I was like, oh, I think I'm like over the first hump. And so that was kind of like the thing that forced me into that space a little bit. But yeah, no, I mean, I feel the same. Like I feel so much compassion for people that struggle with addiction, because I think, it's like we were like hunter gatherers for so long. And then all of a sudden our world just evolved into the crazy world it is now, where like, instead of hunting and gathering, we're like working with 3 different jobs to like survive and dealing with a world that's in heavy crisis. And I don't think our brains have evolved fast enough to handle the amount of stress that has been put on them over the last, several hundred years, a couple of thousand years. And so I think it makes sense to me that we often need something to distract us from facing those things, like our brain. Really
make it easier, right? We're all isolated and not doing anything. So we're like, TikTok, let's try it.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I don't know, but I think that space did help me really look at what my emotional state was, which felt pretty dire. And I got to a point where I like truly just didn't want to exist anymore. And I tried to make myself not exist anymore. And I failed at that. And it was the lowest point I'd ever gotten to, because it was like, okay, well, now I've tried to get rid of myself. That didn't even work. How do I stay alive in a world like that? Like in a world where I can't even do that, And I was talking with a friend who took antidepressants regularly and just said, you deserve to live a life that's not at 50% or at 0%. And I think it was the first time, like, I realized I had all this stigma built up about antidepressants. Like, oh, I don't want my brain to be dependent on something else, or like, if I take these, maybe I won't be able to write music anymore, or it'll make me a zombie, or, something like that I really didn't know anything about. It was just like, because people weren't talking about antidepressants, and because I didn't have good examples of friends who were like, oh, this is how this felt. I didn't know. All I knew was like maybe the worst stories with people, and not anything that was like pretty normal. And so I think hitting such a low point and having somebody say to me, you deserve to be healthy. Like that was such a changing point. I had never thought about it in those terms. Like, oh, I actually just by nature of existence, I deserve to live at my full potential. I don't deserve to be at my worst spot. And so in that period, also had a friend talk to me about it. Like, if you were diabetic, like nobody would fault you for needing insulin. But for some reason, if our brains aren't producing enough serotonin, we have all this stigma. Like, you need to figure out how to just heal this yourself through mind power. You literally just might need more serotonin. Like, why would that be crazy? And so that was such a big change for me to be like, okay, I'm going to try this out. Like, I've tried everything else. I've tried all the worst things. Like, there's nothing left for me to try except to try these meds that I've been kind of scared of. And they helped me get back to like not being below 0. They helped me feel like I wasn't drowning anymore.
I know exactly what feeling you're talking about, that drowning and that just feeling at your lowest point. And there is, I think we've gotten better than like our parents and our parents' parents as far as starting to talk about our struggles with mental health, but there's still, to your point, such a stigma associated with it. And there's an even bigger stigma associated with taking medication with it. And I was one of those people that was like, I don't want to. I'm this outgoing, bubbly, sometimes maybe too much for people kind of person, but that's just who I am. I didn't want to take something that was going to make me like a zombie, right? Or change my personality. Or what if it's the opposite? You hear the horror stories of making you worse. And so all of those things went through my head until I listened to your song. And it was, and I'm gonna, I know you know your song, but I'm gonna repeat this verse. I was scared of what it meant if I needed medicine just to feel like me again, to keep my demons in every now and then. And that verse, I could not relate to that more than, I mean, that was something that spoke so much to my soul that I was like, you know what? You're damn straight. I'm climbing up out of this hell. I'm going to do it. And you saved my life. I mean, you helped me go from that dark, dark place where I couldn't get out of bed, where I was crying every single day. My kids were seeing it, but listening to your song, it was like, all right, Christina, it's time. It's time to go. And it's okay to get medicine. You do. You deserve to feel like you again. You know?
That means a lot to hear that. Yeah, that's what I think is so wild about this song to me is like I wrote it. I mean, I was up in this this was after all this had happened. I was up in this cabin in Maine. I was like snowed in. I was trapped. It was this tiny cabin and I had a wood stove and I was trying to write a few more songs for the album.
Yeah.
I felt like I was missing something. And I wrote this piano part and I started walking around the room in this cabin and singing I Deserve to Be Well over and over and just feeling like, oh, this is the message I need to hear. But I think that when I finished writing the song, I thought, okay, I think people are going to connect with this chorus, but I don't think anybody's going to connect with the verse because I don't know anybody who's struggling with meds or wanting to be on meds.
Right.
And so I think the fact that when the sound started kind of taking off on TikTok, it was the verse, like that really shocked me because I really thought nobody's going to connect with this. This is too personal. Hopefully people like the chorus.
Yeah.
It's been such a revelation to me because I've had so many even good friends who have come up to me and said, like, I've never really told anybody this before, but I've actually I took antidepressants for 6 months when I was going through this thing or like whatever. And just realizing that there were so many people who had either been too scared or had taken them and just not talked about it, that like all the good stories about it being helpful weren't coming out because you were only hearing like the bad stories of people who didn't connect with their meds and realizing that so many more people have struggled with this decision or thought than I ever imagined. Like I really thought nobody's going to connect with this. So it shocked me.
It's amazing. And I tell you, so, I live stream every day, multiple times a day, and I always play medication by you guys. That I have people that come on my live stream and say, hey, can you play medication again? Can you play medication again? And I'll tell you, like, thank you for that song. Not just me, but you and your band members with that song and sharing your story is helping so many people. I mean, we truly, I feel like, are an epidemic with mental health struggles, and not just in our country, in our world, because to your point, the world is evolving and changing and crazy and nothing like our grandparents ever thought it would be, right? And we're just struggling to survive and trying to live and make it and just be happy. Nobody wants to be unhappy, And your song truly has been an inspiration to so many. And I just hope you guys know how much I think you guys have saved so many lives with this song. And I feel like the more that you guys talk about it, and hopefully a lot of people see this podcast, that we're going to have people coming out of the woodworks. Is that the right saying? The woodworks saying, oh my gosh, your song, it saved me. It saved me. And so tell me, when you were in the cabin, you said you started to write and put the words together. How long ago was that?
Last January.
It was
Yeah.
last January.
Yeah. So the song, I mean, in music terms, it came together really quick because a lot of times what happens is like you write a song, it might be a year or two before you even get into the studio. And then once that's done and it gets recorded, mixed, mastered, released, it could be another year. So like some of the songs could be 3 years old. So for me, having it been, you know, it was written in January, it was recorded in April, it was out by October, I think is when it came out. I mean, for us, that's very quick for a
It was
song.
really bad. I mean, because I started my journey on TikTok as Why Not Be Authentic in August. I started to listen to it and reached out to you. And I think the more that we hear songs like this, and I cannot wait to hear more of your album, but the more we hear songs about this, the more that we can normalize and stop that stigma associated with struggling with mental health or scared to take medication and saying it's okay, you deserve to be well,
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
Now with your other bandmates, how do you guys decide? Like, are you the songwriter and then you kind of guys all put it together with the music, or how does that
Yeah.
work? I've always been curious.
Yeah, that's basically how it works. Yeah.
Okay.
I write all the songs and then we'll get together and kind of figure out what the music and arrangement sounds like,
Yeah.
you know, kind of as a group, which is fun. You know, it's interesting when you have 6 different people, like everybody listens to different kinds of music, and the process of trying to figure out like where are the common points between us is like kind of a complicated process. Sometimes it takes a lot of work, sometimes it's easier. Like Medication, honestly, I think came together very quickly. I had made a demo of it that had some instruments on it, and the final version didn't change a lot from the demo. We kind of stuck to like, how do we bring out the emotional core of the song instead of trying to make it like, here's a crazy cool part, or you know, we really wanted to feel like the emotional core was all there. We worked with this amazing producer in Nashville named Jeremy Lutito, and he did the whole he produced the whole record, and just he had such a vision. I met him and came in with the demos for that song, for Medication, and one of our other singles from this record, Rain It Down, that came out a few months ago. And he kind of and was like, okay, like I want to do this and I know how these need to sound. And it really helped us get a particular focus.
I bet you guys were so stoked. I think of the other singer, I think it's Dax. He's also a big mental health advocate. He had a song with Darius Rucker. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about.
No, I don't.
But he just like you guys, like his song came out on TikTok, and that's just kind of how it and I think he's in Nashville. I may be wrong, but I was thinking about you preparing for this podcast and meeting with you, and I was like, gosh, if they could ever, you guys get a song with Dax,
oh, that'd be awesome.
like you would explode. Just because you both stand for mental health advocacy and sharing your stories, and you both have just such unique voices, beautiful voices that so that's something you gotta let me know if that works out.
Okay, I'm walking it away.
The other thing I wanted to ask you is, so I stalk your TikTok because I'm obsessed with your song, but you had a reel that you posted, and it showed you like I think you were at a concert and you were playing. Do you do the drums? Were you playing the drums as well?
No, I definitely wasn't me on drums. I'm not
the drums.
No.
But I think you said like it was right after you guys sang, it showed the whole band. You were on stage and it was Medication. And you said right after this, I had to come off stage and I had a panic attack. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. I've been struggling with it's interesting. I've been working with a neuropsychologist kind of around just some crazy kind of mental breakdown stuff I had a few years ago when all this was happening, and it's a lot to go into, but the short version is I had a pretty big breakdown that like changed a lot in my brain. It seems like it might have been chemically induced, I'm not sure, but ever since then I started just dealing with panic attacks in crowds of people, not all the time but a lot more. And it's been showing up in a way where I've been almost like avoiding eventually this year I've started avoiding like big groups of people because it's just difficult, which obviously makes my job a little bit difficult when I'm playing music around people. Yeah. And just navigating the feeling of like not being in control of your brain. Like I normally feel fine around people. I've never had problems like that before. I can navigate them well, whatever. And just be this feeling of like, I'm standing in a crowd, I'm listening to some music, and all of a sudden my body starts getting clammy and freezing up, and my heart rate shoots up, and I feel like I'm about to die, and I have to like get out of there. And I start, you know, literally feeling like I'm spiraling out. And so, yeah, this happened. We were like maybe one song away from being done. All of a sudden, I felt those feelings popping up, and just like, oh my God, I've got to get through this song. Just, you know, going into auto mode, trying to like get through this song, and went backstage and just laid on the floor for the next hour, just totally kind of freaking out and my vision blacking out. And yeah, it's strange. It's been a weird thing to navigate, I think, because it's obviously like there's this part in doing music where you feel like, okay, here's all the stuff I deal with in my personal life, and I can almost like polish it up and put it out to people on TikTok or some space, you know, in a way that is like the way that feels easiest to present it. It's almost like creating distance. And I think that moment of that panic attack on stage, it was like this moment of like, oh, I can't put any distance. Like my difficult brain is happening right here in front of people, and there's no way for me to cover that up. Like, it's affecting my space in music, and I'm now being forced to show up more authentically, because I just have to say, like, this is what's happening. I don't know what to do about it, so I'm sorry, you know. So it definitely brought me like closer to what I'm doing in a way that would be difficult, but hopefully also like much more real, even though sometimes that's difficult too.
It is. Well, and that's the hardest part when you're going through these healing journey. I feel like you go through the hardest times before you can really make that transformation. It's just part of the healing process. But panic attacks, I started having them this past summer, and I literally thought I was having a heart attack. I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I'm dying. Like, I'm dying.
Yeah.
Is what it felt like. And now, you know, doing this and live streaming and talking to other people that struggle with mental health, it seems like anxiety and panic attacks are like the number one thing that people struggle with so bad that like enforces their depression. It makes that depression worse.
Right.
Because to your point, you don't want people to see that side of you, because there's been such a stigma, you know, associated with it. But what I can say is the fact that you are being your real, raw, authentic self. I think we need that now in this life more than ever. And I think it's going to help so many other people that are gravitating towards your music, you know, going, oh my God, he struggles too. And he was able to get through that song, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, before I'd ever had panic attacks, I think I was even somebody who was just like, somebody's just feeling anxious and they're saying they're having a panic attack. And what does that mean? And when you actually have one, like that experience, like you truly feel like you're having a heart attack. You think you're dying. Like it's so hard to explain that to somebody who hasn't had them. And I feel, you know, almost grateful to know that experience, so that when other people tell me they're having that experience, I'm like, whew, like that's a heavy thing. That's a hard thing that you're walking through, you know?
Well, and I think you mentioned that like when you're out there, you're like, look, this may happen. I mean, putting it out there and having your music, it speaks to itself. Like I really do believe that you, as shitty as it seems, right? The stuff that I've gone through, the stuff that you have gone through, are going through, I almost feel like these things happen because of the bigger picture, which is we're going to help so many more people that have gone through it. Sucks going through it. It's like, why do I got to go through this? Right. But in the healing journey, like talking about it and sharing it is just, I think it's going to help so many people. And thank you for your vulnerability with your music, everything. I know that it's much appreciated. When you go through this, is that the first time that happened while on tour?
Yeah, while on stage. It happened other times just attending things, but that was the first time, like actually on stage.
Actually on stage. How do your bandmates, you know, are they able to help you with any tools or resources to help you kind of then, you know, what kind of tools do you use to help you get out of that, or try to get out of that panic attack?
You know, it was so great. Again, like I have really wonderful bandmates. So because that was the first time, they didn't exactly know what to do. And one of my bandmates, Graham, who plays horns with us, he's also our tour manager. So I'd gone back into the green room and was just laying down and holding my chest. And Graham didn't know what to do, but he basically just like, anybody who came into the green room, he's like, you've got to leave, like stay out of here. And then he packed up all my stuff and brought it to the van. And then, you know, there were people waiting to talk to me after the show. And Graham kind of like almost security guarded me, like brought me to the van, like, sorry. And then the next day we were all in the van driving to the next show. And I was able to kind of, you know, say like, hey, like this happened and it's happened to me before. And there's some things I need, like, I need somebody to just come press on my chest really hard as long as they can, like, because I feel so out of body. I just need somebody to, like, I need to feel somebody's pressure on my body, and it helps me ground. And so I was able to lay stuff out for them, and they were all able to be like, sweet, like now we know the signs, like if this happens again, we know what the tools are to be able to like help and be great. It's great. I mean, the fact that they asked, they were curious, like, what can we do? How can we be there?
That means you got a family.
Oh my God. Yeah. Totally. They are totally family. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard of getting like an ice bag or something cold and like putting it on your chest?
Oh, that's a great idea.
I heard that until recently, because panic attacks have been like the topic of conversation lately on my live streams, just because so many people struggle with them. And I would say a good handful of people say that we started either opening the freezer and letting that cold air hit you, or get like an ice pack and just put it on there, and it kind of shocks your body. So it gets out of that panic mode, you know, and
that's
which I never thought about before.
Yeah.
So it's one of those tools in the toolbox if you ever need it.
Totally. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. That makes a lot of sense to me. Like anything that just helps you feel your body in an extreme way, I think, like in the opposite extreme way, that it pulls you back into your body, I think can be
well, it's kind of like too. Have you ever watched Georgia and Gina, or Gina and George? Do you know what I'm talking about on Netflix? They talk about a lot about mental health, and they do a rubber band and they flick it.
Oh, yeah.
Another like resource to use if you're having one of those panic attacks, which again, they're horrible. But it's something that we go through, and we just, you know, I think the more you hear my bird, the more that we get.
I love that.
I muted out the background sounds. So as we're doing this, if this is part of the podcasting that's going to be on there, they're not going to hear that. They're going to have no idea what we're talking about.
That's awesome.
Are you going on tour like every day? Is that where you're at right now?
No. So we've just had some random shows. Like we played a festival in Florida. I think next month we're playing a festival in Columbia, South Carolina.
Oh,
yeah. And we have some random festivals this spring, but it's a little bit chill. We're kind of saving up our tour space for the fall, because our album's going to come out in August. And so hopefully late August, September, October will be a very full US tour, as well as we host our own music festival here in Saxbaha. And so that's in late September. So we're kind of gearing up for that right now, but we're just getting that. Yeah, it's really a lot of fun, and it's awesome and really connected. It's really based around community and connection with the earth and mental health. And you know, there's music all day, but there's a lot of other stuff happening to try to really like bring forward a space of like safety and community. And it's
okay, you're gonna have to send me information, because you know I'm not far. I'm like, what, 3 hours from you?
Yeah. You can be there. I think tickets will be going on sale soon. Yeah. So that's kind of the tour space. We had a few years in a row where we toured. Like there was one year we toured like 7 or 8 months out of the year, and another year we toured 6 months. And it's fun, but it's so draining. So we all kind of like
we're talking about that, like you know, when musicians and bandmates go on tours, and like the time changes and the flights, lack of sleep and not eating well, that all can, you know, that can mess with your mental health as well. So I was curious, when you guys, when anyone really is doing tours and they have all of this lack of sleep, how do you handle and make sure your mental state is where it should be?
I mean, a few people in the band are very avid about yoga. That's a big thing
Good.
for them. I always bring my running gear, and I feel like for the first 2 or 3 weeks, I'll try to get runs in, but you get so
Mhm.
exhausted. It's like eventually it's like I just need to sleep, not a run. But honestly, a lot of sleeping happens in the van. We end up with a couple seats that people can lay down in, and we switch out, every few hours so that people
Oh,
can get
that's
a
good.
few sleep. And we're pretty good about like alone time in the van, which sounds impossible when you have 6 people, but everybody brings their big headphones, and you just kind of like, if somebody's in a state, like don't start having conversations, like just let everybody kind of have their space and clue out for a bit. And luckily, for a lot of years we toured, we weren't making a lot of money, so we were staying with people. And
Mhm.
that was really tough, because then you're social at the show, and then you get to somebody's house at 1 in the morning and they want to hang out and talk, and they're being so up and 2 or 3. So luckily now we're at a place where we get hotels almost every night, and like even though we love the people we've stayed with, it's just been for us a nice like social break to like get to stay in hotels. You wake up, you have breakfast, you have a gym if you want to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's kind of no way around it. Like, I think if you're doing it for that long, even with all
Mhm.
those things in place, you eventually hit a point where you're just like, I'm exhausted all the time. My mental health is struggling. And so, if we do a long tour, like if we do a 2 month tour, we usually do a month and then we take a week where we have a break. We'll try to find like an Airbnb somewhere where we can all just relax for a week before we hop back on for the second month, just to kind of reset.
Love that you guys prioritize that, because I mean, I don't know, I'm not in the music industry. I think about just people that go on tours a lot. I think of Taylor Swift because my daughter's a Swiftie, and I'm like, how does she do? Like, she went to what, Beijing, and then came back
Yeah.
for the NFL game for the Super Bowl, and I'm like, I
Yeah.
just exhaustion, and
Yeah.
exhaustion is not good if it catches up with you.
Totally. Yeah.
But you bring up something else. I am so glad I have you on today. So I did a podcast this past Friday with another gentleman, and we talked a lot about men's mental health. And I was like, I'm so glad I get to talk to David today, because I feel like, again, we have that stigma associated with mental health. It's better than our parents and their parents when it was then, but we still have it. And my goal is hopes that these podcast shows that mental health does not discriminate, no matter how you identify yourself, what your political affiliation is, whether you're rich or poor, famous or not, kids or no kids, no matter where you come from, nothing. It just does not discriminate, right? There's over 200 mental health diagnoses. But the one thing that I feel like is talked about, and I feel like the least out of all of these mental health conversations, is men's mental health. And
Hmm.
I'd love to hear your input on that.
Yeah, which is wild because my understanding is that men have much higher suicide rates than
They
women.
do. They do.
And it's yeah, I think a lot about just the way that men have been brought up, and they get brought up this way by other men, and
Mhm.
it perpetuates itself to think like if you are showing or displaying emotion, you are not being manly. You're not
Right.
yeah, you're weak somehow. But the thing that's wild to me is like what happens is then men bottle up the emotion, and then it comes out in ways that are actually more weak, whether it's like anger
So
or
true.
extreme depression that leads to a lot of um bad interactions with other people, because the
Mhm.
men don't know how to contain their emotions. They don't know how to express them fully. And so it's like it's wild to me to think that like expressing emotion in some way is weak, when like I think it's actually
Mhm.
much more connective. And I know so many people who date men, and that was even my experience dating men as well, that
Yeah.
it was hard for me to find men I could emotionally connect with, because so many of the men I tried to date were like just absolutely, they were not emotionally literate. It felt like. And so I think that plays into the mental health space, because I think the
100%.
men feel totally like emotionally isolated, like they're not allowed to or able to connect
Feel
with
it.
others.
It's almost
And
like And the ones that cover it up, like you were saying, the ones that you've dated, and they just, maybe they're not so empathetic to it if they can't
Right.
relate to it. Like that's one aspect of it. But then the other aspect of it, and again, this is just speaking to you and one of my really good friends that struggles with mental health. And then Friday's conversation I had with another guest on the podcast. Men are grown up, right? You're the man. You
Yeah.
just need to take care of things. You're strong. You're like, we can't talk about our emotions. And that has faulted men so much. And I feel like that is probably why the men's suicide rates are much higher, is because they don't feel comfortable talking to anyone. They don't feel comfortable admitting that they're struggling and that they need to get help. And they get to that place that you and I have been to where you just feel like there's nothing left in you. And I think that that is why those suicide rates are so high. I think of, and I don't know if you heard about this, you're in North Carolina, so you probably did, the gentleman that drove his car off the Virginia Beach Pier, which absolutely broke my heart. And I was like, that is why we need to talk about this more. And I don't know the exact circumstances of why he did it, right? I don't know if anyone will ever know, but it looked intentional. And I think it reinforces the fact that, mental health in general, we need to talk about more and stop that stigma associated with it. But men's mental health, we really, really need to like focus in on that and say, hey, it's okay to talk about your feelings. It does not make you weak. It actually makes you very, very strong and brave.
Totally.
Right?
Totally. And I think that goes for everyone, both men and women, because I think those ideas about men get really perpetuated by everyone.
Mhm.
I think it's to some degree made out to be like, oh, just men, like men pass this down to other men, which is true, but I think men have passed this down to other women too. And like,
100%.
I mean, you can see it on TikTok, even just the
Yeah.
TikToks where women say their icks about men, and a lot of them have to do with men like showing any sort of emotion, that like somehow that becomes like a gross out for women about like men and how they interact, that
Yeah.
oh, he's showing an emotional side, like that's bad thing. And it's like, until that's broken down from communities of people on personal levels, it's going to keep popping up in really bad ways. So yeah, like a few months ago with a bunch of my guy friends, we started just like a men's group, and the whole idea was like, we're going to have an open hang every Thursday. If it's 2 people, it's awesome. If it's 10 people, it's awesome.
Yeah.
But it's just a space for men to be able to get together. And some weeks it's like, oh, we're just talking about a movie, but some weeks it's like, oh, we're actually getting like real safe space for like deep emotional connection, and we're all about like what we learned in therapy this week, and trying to encourage the other people that like therapy might be helpful for them, and so trying to like just in like very personal grassroots ways create spaces for men to connect with other men and like show their emotional states and feel safe in that.
I love that you do that. I feel like we need more and more of that for sure. And you're right. It's men and women alike, that struggle for different reasons. And the men's mental health has been just a hot topic, I guess, because of my podcast and the guests that we've had on lately. But I have a son and he's 10 and he plays football and all the sports, but he's just like me. He wants to save the world when it comes to that aspect things. He feels everything. So I'm a deep, big empath. Like, I don't think I realized the meaning of empath until I got older. And I'm like, I feel everything. Like when the Maui fires happened, I felt like I was there, like I feel everything. And my son is the same way. And so I've talked to my husband, because my husband grew up like, we don't talk about this stuff. And I'm like, Blake is not like we have to say it. So that is what we are here for, to talk about something that's bothering you. And so it's been a really big, I'd say, movement in our house, especially with both of our kids. But it's okay to talk about your feelings. Don't bottle it up, because that's when you explode. Like, it's okay to say if you're sad or upset or whatever it is, but that's what we're here for. And so I love that you're doing that. I feel like you could start a movement in different cities, like have a name for it, but it's something that's definitely needed for men and women. But I think if you had more of that, it's almost like Celebrate Recovery. I used to go to that years ago, and it's just so helpful. It's not that we're trauma bonding. I mean, in a sense we are, but it's not like we're victimizing, feeling bad. It's just that someone can relate to the way we feel, so we know we're not alone. which
Right.
makes it so much better, you know?
Totally. Totally. Yeah. And I think in the US, we're at a particular disadvantage because, you look at a lot of other countries in the world and they're built around like families and families that stay and live together in walkable spaces. Like so many, like Europe, it's like most cities, every third corner, there's a big open plaza and everybody's walking where they need to go and able to meet each other. And like we're so and being solitary and having your own fortress and like doing everything yourself, raising your 8 kids with just a couple or whatever. That
Right.
it's just, I think in the US we've built a country around being solitary, and then I think what's happened is now we're seeing the results of like, oh shoot, like I feel alone and I don't have spaces to be with other people, and now I have to drive at 45 minutes to be able to hang out with other people if I want. And so I think that it's become like we have to put much more intention. Like it's not just going to happen naturally to find the healthy spaces. That has to become an intentional act. Whereas in other parts of the world, it might be less so. But here, I think it very much has to become.
I never thought about that before, but I bet you're right. I kind of want to look up now, like the statistics of like depression and anxiety in somewhere like Italy versus, because I think of Italy when I think of like all the families and how close everything is. And even though I've never been there, but I think that would be a good case study to look at for sure. What would be your advice? Because I know we're running up on time, but what would be your advice to someone that is struggling with depression and anxiety, and let's say specifically panic attacks, because I know that's a hot topic lately. If you had just a couple words of advice to give them, what would that be?
The advice that my neuropsychologist told me is like, you can't stop the panic attacks. Like you can't all of a sudden flip the switch in your head and now your brain's never going to have panic attacks again. There's no guarantee about it. And so what you can do is work to accept that it's a part of how your brain is interacting and figure out how you can best prepare yourself to be kind to yourself through it. And so whether that's a panic attack popped up and it was terrible and now you feel awful and you actually need to take the rest of the day off, like, okay, that's part of who you are. It will do the work that you need to do to not feel guilty about taking the rest of the day off.
Right.
Put your energy towards kindness to yourself instead of towards trying to stop the panic attacks, because that's futile. But you can put the energy towards self-kindness and self-preservation and giving yourself proper emotional space.
I love that, because we are really mean to ourselves in our head.
Yeah.
We are our worst enemies. And taking the time to appreciate ourselves, maybe say affirmations. And that's really hard when you're having those panic attacks. But I don't know, grab a bag of peas, put it on your chest and go, you know what? I love me. It's okay.
Yeah.
This is what makes me special,
Exactly.
And able to get through it.
Exactly. Your body is having like an overblown response to something that it recognizes as a real threat.
Yeah.
And so being able to have compassion to your body and say like, thank you for protecting me. Maybe you're protecting me from something I don't need protecting from right now, and that sucks, but thank you for trying to protect me. Like I can love my body through this. Like that is going to help you get through it in a much better way than just trying to keep yourself from having them.
So much better. And I have to quote someone, and I have her permission to say her name. Her name's Allie. I met on TikTok, and she struggles and she's open about it with depression and anxiety. But she told me one of the things that she does when she has panic attacks is she started to say a little prayer for someone else. And I was like, I have never thought, I mean, I pray and believe in God, but I have never thought about that. Like, that is the last thing that crosses my mind. Yeah. What's such a selfish thing to do when you're going through a panic attack? But she was like, it worked. And I was like, that's amazing. That's a good little, pearl to give someone. Just being able to give these resources to help other people. So, well, David, I thank you so much for taking this time to meet with me. I know you're busy. I am so obsessed with your band and your music. It saved my life, and I know it's going to save so many more lives. But just by normalizing the fact that it is okay to take medication and it is okay to take care of yourself. We all struggle. And I just can't thank you enough for me and my family, because I'm not kidding you when I say like your song saved me. So and it motivated me to do this. So,
Thanks for telling me that, and thank you for having me on. I feel really great.
of course. And before we go, is there any little bit of a verse you want to sing to us, or give it a snippet of something in the future? Something just so our fans, if they haven't heard you.
Yeah, okay. Let me hold on. I like randomly have my guitar right by here. So we have a song that's coming out in a few months called The Come Down, and is about the experience of having friends who struggle with kind of bipolar spaces, trying to figure out like how do you be there for people that are struggling, when especially like when it's hard to be there when they're disappearing for 3 months at a time, but then it's also hard when they show up for 3 weeks all the time, and you're like, well, this might be the last time I see you in the next 3 months, because I don't know when you're going to crash back down. And then I started experiencing those symptoms and was able to see the people that were there for me and like how they showed up. And so I wrote a song about showing up for each other in that space. And I'll just play you a verse and a chorus so you can hear a little taste of it. It goes, I haven't heard from you in weeks, and now you're blowing up my phone. We almost hit the season peak, so I was leaving you alone. Now I can hardly see the signs of hibernation on your face. It's like you traveled back in time, but ended up in the same place. The further up you go, the further down you fall. But in the middle isn't lit, all and I can see burning in your eyes, dancing on the ground. The comet of your mind coming round. Well, I'm gonna be there when you come back down. Ooh, ooh. And I can see the pedal on the floor, the glimmer of the key. You're going till your tank's running empty. I'm gonna be there when you come back down.
Oh,
So,
burst into tears. It is so amazing.
so that comes out early April. We're very excited about it.
April. All right, guys, you heard it first here. Early April. Of course. And again, you and Dax, you have to get together, because I'm listening to you, and I can just, if you haven't listened to him, go on TikTok, you'll find him.
Okay.
Together, and you're both big advocates for mental health. So, love it.
Awesome. Thank you.
I just cannot thank you enough, David. I really appreciate this.
Thank you. Me too. I really appreciate it. Thank you for using your platform for this too.
Again, this is David Wimbish with The Collection. He's also on TikTok and www.thecollectionband.com. And his music is available in production on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, iTunes Store, Amazon Music, SoundCloud, Tidal, Deezer, and Pandora. You've got to listen to his music and his bandmates if you haven't. He is amazing. Thank you so much. Until next time, we'll see you later.